or comments, feel free to use the Q&A and chat box feature. I know Lisa has a very interactive session with you today, so don't be shy. Feel free to drop your comments, your questions in there. So without further ado, Lisa, I will go ahead and pass this over to you.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for joining us at this point in time. I do have several questions that are included throughout the presentation that I would like you to respond through the chat. So if you can get comfortable with your chat feature, make sure that it's open so that we can dialogue through chat. I would appreciate it. Even if you can introduce yourselves at this point so others know who is in attendance, that would be wonderful as well. We are going to get started here. I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about myself so that you know my background. I spent the first decade of my nursing career in child adolescent mental health before going into school health. So I was a certified school nurse for approximately 14 years, just under 14 years. And so that really is where my heart lies with our youth. I had the opportunity to be a school nurse in the elementary, the junior high level, the high school level, and believe it or not, we even had a kindergarten center with all of our kindergartners in it. So with a desire to teach, that's when I decided to go full-time into academia, and currently I am at Penn State. And I am always looking for opportunities to partner with school nurses. So please keep that in the back of your mind. Next, we're going to look at our learning objectives for this evening. There are three. So of those three objectives, the first focuses on identifying factors that both strengthen as well as place a child's mental health at risk. So after discussing children's mental health in more detail, we're going to shift the focus to strategies for promoting mental health and well-being of the school nurse. The final objective centers around how prioritizing mental health can influence one's overall health. I'm just going to pause for a second here and look at all the different locations where the nurses are coming from. So that is wonderful. I do see that someone says there is an echo. So let's make sure that everything is on mute that needs to be. Hopefully that's resolved. The next slide shows a brief content outline. We're going to have a mental health quiz. We're going to talk more about mental health in general, and then we're going to switch to prioritization of their mental health, and their refers to children, and then your mental health. And then finally, just a summary at the end. But first, of course, we're going to start with a quiz. No worries, we're going to do this quiz together, so hopefully you'll follow along with me as we access the quiz. And you can put your responses into the chat. So for the first question, we're focusing on mental health myths. Poor mental health increases a risk for long-lasting chronic physical conditions like heart disease, stroke, cancer, or all of the above. And again, you can put your response into the chat. See a lot of all of the above. So let's select all of the above. And of course, that is correct. Poor mental health increases a risk for long-term chronic physical conditions like heart disease, stroke, and cancer. Our next question, mental illnesses are they very common? Are they not so common? Or are they fairly common? I see a lot of very common, so let's click very common. And once again, that is correct. About 1 in 5 US adults will experience a mental illness at some point in their lives. That's a lot. Next question. Suicide is the leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 24 in the United States. Now, the question is, suicide is the 24th, or is it the 10th, or 40th, or the second leading cause? Looks like a large number are saying the second leading cause. Yes, once again, suicide is the second leading cause of death among people ages 10 to 24 in the United States. And just stopping to think about that, as young as 10. So once again, those are your students. Next question. Mental illness cannot be treated or can be treated? I see can be treated. And that is absolutely correct. Mental illness can be treated. We know that research shows that people with mental illness can get better and many recover completely. Excellent. Mental illness is it more than the absence of mental disease? Is it only important for some people? And is it an important part of overall health and well-being? Overall health. Excellent. An important, and we know it's an important part of overall health. Not only does it impact our well-being, how we function, our emotional, our socio-emotional health, but it also impacts our physical health. I've got a few more questions. If you know someone with poor mental health, you can help by reaching out and letting them know help is available, helping them access mental health services, learning and sharing the facts about mental health, all of the above. I see a lot of all of the above is absolutely correct. If you know someone with poor mental health, you can help by reaching out and letting them know help is available. Next question. People with mental illness are violent. Yes or no? True or false? I'm seeing a lot of falses. So that is correct. And what we actually know is that people with mental illnesses tend to be victims of violence, even more so over the general population. Next question. So half of all mental illness occur before a person turns what age? 14, 18, or 10? Seeing some 14s. It looks like people think it's 14. That is correct. Half of all mental illness occurs before a person turns 14. Once again, look at the priority and school health. School nurses see this age group. So if half of mental illnesses occur before the age of 14, you are in a prime position to affect our youths, our school-age youth's mental health. Next question. Serious mental illness costs America how much in lost earnings per year? Is it 193.2 billion, 20 million, 400 billion, or 1 billion? I see a couple different options. 293 to 400. Any other takers? Someone says 1 billion. Let's try the 193 since that was the first one to come through. And that is correct. Serious mental illness cost America 193.2 billion in lost earnings per year. And last question. Mental illness is caused by personal weakness, lack of willpower, or a number of factors. A number of factors, absolutely. We know that there are multiple factors that influence one's mental health. And that is it for our quiz. Thank you very much for participating. Hopefully that helped to debunk some myths as well as clarify some of the facts about mental illness. We're going to review some of those facts a little bit more closely. So point one is that poor mental health does increase the risk for chronic physical conditions. So in the chat, tell me some of your experience. What physical conditions are correlated with mental health? conditions. So if someone has poor mental health, what are some chronic physical conditions that you've also seen? Have you seen any? Oh, headaches. Excellent. High blood pressure. Absolutely. Stomach aches, fatigue. Those are all great examples that are correlated with poor mental health. Number two, mental illnesses are very common. So about 1 in 5 US adults will experience a mental illness at some point in their life. Number three, we know suicide from the quiz is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 24 in the United States. Once again, how many of you serve as students between the ages of 10 and 18? How many? We also have number four, mental illness can be treated. Research has shown that people with mental illness can get better, and many do recover completely. And then mental illness, we know, is an important part of overall health. Number six. So you can help by learning and sharing facts about mental health. If you know someone with poor mental health, you can help by reaching out and letting them know help is available, helping them access mental health services, and learning and sharing the facts about mental health, especially if you hear something that isn't true. Number seven, the vast majority of people with mental illness are no more likely to be violent than anyone else. In fact, people with mental illnesses are more likely to be victims of violent crimes than the general population. I do want to be clear that there are times, especially having worked in an acute care setting, where individuals who are suffering from mental health issues or they're in a mental health crisis, that they do demonstrate behaviors that can be considered violent. But overall, that is not the case. Number eight, half of all mental illness occurs before a person turns 14, and 3/4 of mental illness begin before age 24. Why is that important? Really is important, the fact that half of all mental illness occurs before the age of 14. Go ahead and put something in the chat. Why is that so important? Early identification, excellent. If you can recognize it early, you can treat it early. Very good. So you can get them a correct diagnosis and early treatment. Wendy, those are their developmental years. Excellent. And again, early identification, early treatment. That is absolutely correct. Number nine, serious mental illness cost America. We already found that out, 193.2 billion in lost wages. And then number 10, mental illness is caused by numerous amount of factors, including biological factors, stressful or traumatic life events, even chronic health conditions. Excellent job. Next slide. So what is mental health? In the chat, give me some examples of how you would define mental health, whether it's a single word or a phrase. What is mental health? Anxiety, depression. Good. It's your well-being. Sadness, another well-being. Imbalances of emotional and behavior regulation. Excellent. Oh, your ability to function. Perfect. It is your overall well-being. So mental health includes our emotional, our psychological, and our social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. It also helps determine how we handle stress related to others. And in addition, it helps us determine how we make healthy choices and good decisions. Mental health is important at every stage of life, from childhood and adolescence through adulthood. So, why is mental health important for overall health? That's our next slide. Why is it important to overall health? We know that it's important to our overall well being, and mental health is defined as our overall well being. Excellent. It's part of our quality of life to not get burnout. Perfect, especially for nurses. That's how we cope with life's challenges. Very good. So, mental and physical health are equally important components of overall health. For example, depression increases the risk for many types of physical health problems, particularly long lasting conditions, like, for example, diabetes. But on the flip side, the presence of chronic conditions can increase the risk for mental illness. So, individuals with physical conditions often experience high levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. Mental and physical health is fundamentally linked, significantly impacting one's quality of life, which is what Maureen said. When the demands placed on a person exceed their resources and coping abilities, their mental health can suffer. For example, if someone is working long hours, has taken an extra responsibilities, let's just say for caring for a friend or a relative, or is experiencing economic hardships, we know that their mental health and their well being are at increased risk. For children in particular, adverse childhood experiences, better known as ACEs, can have a tremendous impact on their physical as well as their mental health and well being. So, how common are mental illnesses? We learned from the quiz that they are very common in the United States. More than 1 in 5 US adults live with a mental illness. Over 1 in 5 youth, ages 13 to 18, either currently or at some point during their life, have had a serious debilitating mental illness. About 1 in 25 US adults currently live with a serious mental illness, such as schizophrenia, bipolar, or major depression. So let's take a look at the current state of mental health in the 21st century. We've gone through a lot over the last few years. You have gone through a lot over the last few years. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, in 2021, 51.5 million adults in the United States have a mental illness, though only 23 million receive treatment. Nearly 11 million children and adolescents are diagnosed with a mental disorder, and the economic burden of mental illness exceeds the economic burden caused by all other types of cancers. The leading cause of disability is mental health illness for ages 15 to 44, yet only 1 in 4 adults and 1 in 5 children and adolescents receive treatment. In addition, treatment is still lagging with the homeless as well as those with substance issues. Another slide, issues and concerns regarding the current state of mental health. I think our slides are a little off. Just give us a minute here.
Lisa, let me know if I should be going farther ahead or farther behind.
So I'm looking at slide 11. I also sent a note. All right, how about if we go back a little bit? And one more. Keep going. And let's just hold it there for a moment, okay? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to share with you the current state of mental health, and then we'll move forward with a couple more questions and we'll get back on schedule. If you want to advance one more slide ahead. All right, so the current state of mental health, here are some of the issues and concerns associated. In addition to those already discussed, there's what is known as the revolving door, and that effect is due to deinstitutionalization, which is the replacement of long stay psychiatric hospitals with smaller, less isolated community resources. Those who are in mental health crisis are often boarded in emergency departments. Maybe you understand that it could be days and sometimes weeks until someone is placed in an acute care setting. So that's what I mean by boarded in emergency departments while they're awaiting a bed. There are shorter hospital stays, decompensation of patient conditions, rehospitalizations, and dual problem diagnoses that include both mental health and mental illness issues, as well as substance abuse, and also issues. These are also issues of growing concern. And then we did talk about the homeless population, of whom about 1/3 have severe mental illness or chronic substance use disorders, as well as lack of adequate community resources specifically for the homeless population. And I do have a question for you. So, which statement best reflects the current state of mental health and mental illness? The answers are mental health care costs exceed the cost for cancer care. Most adults and children receive adequate mental health care. Community resources for homeless with mental illness are adequate, or deinstitutionalization has reduced the revolving door. I know it's hard to answer that question without it in front of you to see the different question options. So I will give you the answer for this one. It is that mental health care costs exceed the cost for cancer care. We know that the economic burden for mental illness exceeds that of all other cancer care, and only 1 in 4 adults and 1 in 5 children and adolescents receive the necessary mental health care. Community resources for homeless clients with mental illness are inadequate, and deinstitutionalization has led to that revolving door effect. And now I believe we should be caught up, and we're going to start our focus on prioritizing their mental health. So it's time to make mental health a priority. Although we are just concerned with the adults who we interact, although we are just as concerned with the adults who we interact with every day, the focus for this portion of the presentation is going to be primarily on school-age children's mental health, an area that all of you know very well. So according to the World Health Organization, the need for action on mental health is indisputable and urgent. Mental health and well-being is critical to the health of individual students and school communities. It enables our students to learn and grow. It allows them to cope with stressors of life. And it is an integral part of overall health. It is foundational to developing their ability to make decisions, to problem solve, to build relationships, and to shape their future. Students who prioritize mental health tend to find it easier to balance life's demands. That's including their schoolwork, their athletics, as well as their goals. But unfortunately, the escalation of mental health crisis is approaching epidemic proportions. Do you think we are able to access the video?
Yep, I'm gonna pull it up right now.
Perfect. This is just a minute 43-second clip regarding mental health, the mental health epidemic in schools.
There has been a significant increase in the number of students that we're seeing with mental health challenges.
Mental health's affecting 1 in 5 students at any given time, and they're experiencing stress related to performance. They're experiencing the social media pressures that they're facing daily. They're experiencing judgment from a variety of sources, as well as their adverse childhood experiences that each student brings with them into a school setting. So they may have trauma that they cannot leave at home. When they cross the threshold into school, that comes with them and it's affecting their learning.
Yes, we are experiencing students that are dealing with, trauma and some behavioral issues, and there has been an uptick.
This is of epic proportions. So to think that mental health is something that can be handled outside of school, I think is a false assumption. We will need to address it right where the students are, broad-based, to every student that we can touch in our school system. It's a challenge that is going to take resources. It's a challenge that teachers are unprepared for at this point, and it's one that we can't ignore.
Do you all agree that we are at epidemic level with our mental health crisis in our schools? Absolutely, I see a lot of yeses. We're going to look at some research findings that also help to support this notion that we are in an epidemic. And just so that you're aware on this first slide, take a look at the dates. So the data I'm sharing with you is quite alarming, and that started between 2013 and 2019, before we even reached the pandemic. So in this research, researchers looked at 9 different data sources from different years, ranging from 2013 to 2019. And during this period, the most common disorders diagnosed among U.S. children ages, that's supposed to be 13 to 17, not 3, 13 to 17 years, were ADHD and anxiety problems, each affecting more than 1 in 11 children. So you see that ADHD is 9.8% and anxiety is 9.4%. Depression and suicide were a risk for older children. Among adolescents aged 12 to 17, 1 in 5, or 20.9%, had experienced a major depressive episode. Among high school students in 2019, more than 1 in 3, or 36.7%, reported feeling sad or hopeless, and nearly 1 in 5, or 18.8%, considered attempting suicide. About 7 in 100,000 children aged 10 to 19 died by suicide in 2018 and 2019. As we continue to look at the research findings, we're going to move into May of 2020. In May of 2020, shortly after the beginning of the pandemic, a Gallup poll reported that 29% of school-age parents stated that their child's mental or emotional health was harmed. Just 5 months later, by October of that same year, another national survey was conducted by the Jed Foundation, and they reported that 31% of parents indicated that their child's emotional and mental health was worse than before the pandemic. Move ahead to 2021, new research found that parents identified differences for adolescent girls and boys, in which teen girls experienced an increase in anxiety and worry at a rate of 36% compared to their counterparts, where there was only 19% in teen boys. Depression and sadness was reported more frequently by the parents of teen girls than in parents of teen boys, at a rate of 31% versus 18%. So the adolescent females were experiencing anxiety, worry, depression, and sadness at double the rate of their male counterparts. So findings concerning other conditions had more similar distributions among female and male teens. So for example, sleep issues occurred in 24% of females versus 21% of males. And then withdrawal from family occurred in approximately 14% of females and 13% of males. And then aggressive behaviors occurred in 9% of females versus 8% of males. So now let's look at what factors influence mental health. And again, I'd like you to contribute in the chat. What factors do you believe influence the mental health of school-age children? So school age being kindergarten, 5 to 18, that's all school-aged. Genetics, absolutely. It's one of their biologic factors. Their home life, their grades, social media, absolutely. Loss of a parent, so death and grieving, adverse childhood experiences, once again, the social media, the amount of family support. So once again, these influences can be positive, they can be negative. Screen time, bullying, some level of trauma. All of those are factors that can affect one's mental health. I'm going to take a look at a chart here and look at all the dynamics from starting with the individual through societal levels. So you'll see here, let's review the factors first that influence mental health of our youth, beginning with the individual. Just as many of you said, factors such as their age, genetics, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, presence of disability, one's beliefs, their knowledge, their attitudes, their ability to cope, all have an influence when shaping an individual's mental health. If we look at the next layer, we see that relationships with family members, and caregivers play a role, as well as the family's mental health history, economic health, presence or absence of violence, trauma. Each can shape their mental health. As we go out one more layer to the community level, relationships we know continue to be important, especially at school, with their teachers, with their peers. The school climate is important. Academic pressures are also important, as well as their faith and community support. And then at the environmental level, you can have safety concerns, access, environmental concerns can have an influence as far as pollution, natural disasters, climate changes. And then while at the societal level, inequalities, discrimination, media, technology, culture, policies, all of these can also impact one's mental health. You can see how broad and vast contributing factors are on one's mental health, some of which can be deemed positive, others which would be considered to be negative. And the next slide. So more factors were included during the pandemic. What additional factors do you think contributed to mental health symptoms during the pandemic. Isolation, absolutely. I see several people are saying isolation. It is such an important factor to students being face-to-face and in person with their peers, not being able to see their peers, not being able to see their teachers, not being able to see you, not being able to continue those relationships that they have established. Fear, that is also a very important factor to include. Excellent. We also have a list. Let's run down that list. So in addition to the long list that you already shared, here are some of the additional factors that placed our youth at risk for developing mental health symptoms during the pandemic or following the pandemic. Of course, having mental health challenges prior to the pandemic, living in an urban area or an area where there are more severe COVID-19 outbreaks. So that goes to someone saying about fear. In addition, someone also mentions loss of family. You'll see that in this list as well. Having parents or caregivers who are frontline workers, having parents or caregivers at elevated risk of burnout. So how many different parents had to make decisions what to do when their children were no longer going to school, but now school was being held in their own home through virtual classrooms. So being worried about COVID-19, once again, to Krista, who said fear, experience disruptions in their routine, such as not seeing their friends or going to school, experiencing more ACEs, experiencing more financial instability, and there again, experiencing trauma. We know that the incidence of trauma had actually increased despite reporting. Reporting decreased, but the incidence had increased over that period of time. And then factors influencing mental health, two more categories, one of which was already mentioned, biological factors. Someone had mentioned genetics, neurobiological also fit into that category. We also have those cognitive factors that we want to focus on for a moment. So your temperament refers to your overall mood, your attitude and behavior that a child habitually uses to cope with demands and expectations. And then resilience. Resilience is that capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. So being able to adapt to changes in the environment, being able to form nurturing relationships, specifically with adults when the parents aren't around, ability to distance self from emotional chaos, good problem-solving skills. So some of the causes, now we're going to shift from influences on mental health to causes of mental illness. We know that adverse childhood experiences are just one cause, as well as chronic medical conditions, biological factors, chemical imbalances, alcohol and drugs, loneliness and isolation, which once again, most of you mentioned when we talked about the pandemic, what are the influences was, and then health inequities. If we look at individual and system level strategies, the risk can manifest themselves at all stages of life for a mental illness. There are individual and system level strategies for addressing the current mental health crisis, with prevention and promotion being the first critical steps to protecting and promoting a child's health. Risk can manifest at all stages. Those that occur during developmentally sensitive periods, especially early childhood, are particularly detrimental. And someone had mentioned that earlier. For example, harsh parenting, physical punishment is known to undermine child health, as well as bullying is a leading risk factor for mental health conditions. As again, several of you already mentioned, early recognition and intervention are of most importance to the pediatric mental health clients. Concerns such as anxiety, depression, as well as disruptive behaviors can be addressed early on. Others are critical in preventing the development of severe depression. In addition to recognizing at-risk behaviors, school nurses, as well as the multidisciplinary team, must be alert to the data that's out there, including signs and symptoms that may warrant further assessments. Promotion and prevention interventions work by identifying the individual, the social and the structural determinants of mental health, and then intervening to reduce risks, building resilience, and establishing supportive environments for mental health. Interventions can be designed for individuals, they can be designed for groups, such as small groups, as well as entire school communities or whole populations. So protective factors similarly occur throughout our lives and serve to strengthen our ability to be resilient. So in the context of national efforts to strengthen mental health, it's vital to not only protect and promote the mental health and well-being of all, but also to address the needs of people with mental health conditions. And the next slide includes a brief case study. Just talks about Mimi, a 13-year-old child of a single parent who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder from growing up severely abused. This has also made her agoraphobic. Mimi's mother is unemployed because of her emotional instability. Mimi's mother does love her, but often keeps her out of school to take care of her. Despite all this, Mimi, who loves her mother, develops normally. So you hear the term resilience used, and we've used it several times this evening already. What are some characteristics of this child, or what characteristics does this child have that would demonstrate resiliency? What do you think in this case demonstrates resiliency? Is the child able to adapt to the changes in their environment? If they're able to develop normally despite being out of school for periods of time? How about their ability to form relationships? Good grades? That's good. Ability to distance themselves from emotional chaos? Oh, and absolutely, Kim loves her mother and others. That is an excellent example. I would guess that she may have good social intelligence, good problem solving, as well as an ability to perceive goals in the future. Now it's time to spend on you. So now that we have spent a significant time on discussing the mental health of those who you are caring for, it's time to talk about your own mental health and your well-being, something that nurses are not very good at. So there was a concerning report that was published just in November, so just last month, as part of an ongoing collaborative research effort, the American Nurses Foundation and McKinsey survey surveyed more than 7,000 nurses in April and May of 2023 to better understand mental health and well-being in the nursing workforce. The survey results revealed that symptoms of burnout and mental health challenges among nurses remains high, and the potential long-term workforce issues related to these high levels of burnout are not fully understood. So more than half of surveyed nurses in the US reported symptoms of burnout, with less tenured nurses responding more likely to report less satisfaction with their role, had a higher likelihood of leaving the role, and were more likely to be experiencing burnout. Obviously, this is concerning. In addition, nursing turnover is beginning to decline from its 2021 high, but it still remains higher than pre-pandemic levels. So those are the holes, right? Having some difficulty filling certified nurse roles or your health assistant roles. We know that The intent to leave also remains high. About 20% of surveyed nurses indicate they had changed positions in the past 6 months, and about 39% indicated they were likely to leave their current position in the next 6 months. The intent to leave was roughly 41% among nurses who provided direct care versus 30% of those who were providing indirect care. And surveyed nurses who indicated they were likely to leave cited not feeling valued by their organization, insufficient staffing, and inadequate compensation at the top of the list. Those were the top 3 factors influencing their decisions. The insufficient staffing was especially important because the respondents who demonstrated this were had less than 10 years of experience, and that is our future workforce. So that is quite alarming as well. The next slide, our joint research highlighted the magnitude of the physical and the mental health and well-being challenges facing the nursing workforce. Research conducted over the past 3 years has identified the following: sustained feelings of burnout among surveyed nurses. Reported contributors to burnout included insufficient staffing, high patient loads. Think about your caseloads, how they're established through the state of Pennsylvania, and then poor and difficult leadership, as well as too much time spent on administrative tasks. That sure does sound like the workload of a school nurse. In the survey, 56% of the nurses, over half of the nurses, reported experiencing symptoms of burnout, such as emotional exhaustion, and you can see that from the graph. It says well more than half, so 64%, indicated they feel a great deal of stress because of their jobs. Additionally, although they have been slight improvements year over year in respondents' reports of stress, anxiety, and the feeling of being overwhelmed, unfortunately, reports of positive emotions such as empowerment, being grateful, and confident have all declined. On the next slide, you'll see also the age ranges. So looking at the less than 5 years versus more than 50 years, the percent of nurses reporting burnout is relatively high among those with 20 or fewer years of experience. Once again, things to be concerned about. And we're also going to look at the individual and system level approaches. So once again, the research showed that day-to-day work environment had a substantial impact on the mental health and well-being of employees. Given the research information we just discussed, there needs to be action taken to address issues related to sustained burnout, as well as steps taken to support nurses' mental health and well-being. This includes addressing the structural issues, those issues such as workload and that administrative burden that affect the nursing profession that have consistently been identified as root causes of burnout. So we already knew that these were root causes of burnout, but it continues. When nurses experience symptoms of burnout or other mental health and well-being challenges, evidence-based resources need to be available to be used. So how do you prioritize your mental health? How do you prioritize it? Or I should say, do you prioritize your mental health? Go ahead and share in the chat. What do you do? Self-care. It's very important. What else do you do? Regularly exercise, yoga. Great. Make time for exercise. Go out with friends. And again, to your point there, Beth, not enough. I'm with you. Walking, biking, different forms of exercising, leaving work at work. That is a great concept. having a good support system. All of these are very good ways to put your mental health as a priority. There's a program, it's called Healthy Nurse, Healthy Nation, and it is one example of how nurses are taking care of other nurses. So what is Healthy Nurse, Healthy Nation? It's a free nurse health, safety, and wellness program. It's open to all nurses, and it does engage the 6 domains of wellness, which is your physical, your activity, your rest, nutrition, quality of life, safety, and of course, mental health. And you can do this through several platforms. You'll see the hnhn.org. That is one platform if you're interested in checking it out. Another platform would be through text, and that would be Healthy Nurse, and you would text that to 52-886. If you're interested in looking at how nurses advocate for other nurses. On the next slide, it shows the 6 domains. As nurses, we know that wellness exists on a continuum of influences, and it's multifaceted. There's the 6 domains, once again, your physical, your rest, nutrition, your quality of life, safety, and mental health. Looking at these different areas, let's begin with physical health. Considering what are ways that you are optimizing your physical health. Some of you have shared walking, biking, different forms of exercising, specifically walking outside. There are also programs, online programs, where you can actually walk indoors, different steps that you can use, all free. This in particular, once again, is through Healthy Nurse, Healthy Nation. On the next slide, you will see several resources. We do have a video, which is at the top. We're going to skip that at this point in time and actually have that information there available to you. Just gives a brief overview of what Healthy Nurse, Healthy Nation is. Again, some additional resources where it says trends in mental health indicators among nurses. Again, arming yourself with knowledge. And then also the opportunities exist for some challenges, some health challenges. We know that nurses have traditionally suffered from poor mental health at greater rates than the general American public. Depression, anxiety, burnout, compassion fatigue, and suicide are widespread in the nursing population and are likely impacted by the nature of the work, paired with workplace challenges. If we go to the next slide, another example. So this is something that I actually have done with my students in the past at all different age levels. And I do teach them at the students at the college level as well. So from the elementary, middle school, high school to the college age, it's all very appropriate. And it can be done at any point in time. Has anyone, if you just want to respond, yes, have you heard of the 4-7-8 breathing technique? Whoever mentioned that they like to do yoga, this is rooted in yogic practices and it focuses on breathing. So it's very simple to teach, pretty basic. There's 3 basic steps: inhaling through your nose for 4 counts, holding your breath for 7, and exhaling through the mouth for 8 counts. I know it's a little bit more than that. It's not quite as basic as I just explained it. And you do want to focus specifically on the breathing, but this is something that is fairly simple that can be shared with your students. It can be used at any point in time. Believe it or not, I have used it at times as well, difficult days, difficult work environments. And remembering, going back to the basic, that we know that the sympathetic nervous system is responsible for fight or flight, and the parasympathetic is responsible for relaxing the sympathetic nervous system and helping us to calm down. And the 4-7-8 breathing technique actually helps with the parasympathetic nervous system, and it does help us to relax. Next slide. I want to encourage you to remind yourself, as well as your peers, that every nurse needs a break. It's important to take time to reflect, to pause, take a deep breath, and refocus, especially when stress levels rise. And we know that at this time of the year, when all of your students are waiting for that winter break, the stress levels can indeed rise. So take care of yourself, take care of your peers, and take care of your students. Were there any questions now that there's just 2 minutes remaining? No
While some
question.
people, I was going to say, while some people might be writing their questions, I just want to thank you, Lisa, for an excellent presentation on a topic that is much needed right now. As you stated, with going into the holidays, a lot of stress may be happening. And of course, mental health has just been a huge topic for a lot of people. So a lot of wonderful information presented tonight.